Hello ladies and welcome back to my channel. I'm David, you're David, we're all David, and welcome to Dismantling Hate, the series where we walk through some hateful online rhetoric, transphobia, homophobia, xenophobia, fatphobia, all of the hateful things that you can find online. So I am here to provide you with a dazzling personality, a little bit of comedy, a little bit of neuroscience, and a lot of practice combating some of this hateful rhetoric because it's hard to stay composed in the face of discrimination. Now, today we are going to be looking at the YouTube creator called Curly Boy Chuck. And the video that we're going to be reacting to today is called Trans Teacher Admits to Indoctrinating Students with 2 exclamation points. Can you believe? Can you believe? If you would have told me. I'm a little bit tired. I'm at the end of my filming day, but this one I felt really compelled to react to because I'm a trans non-binary individual and I also have an ed degree and have lots of experience both in and out of the classroom in educational settings. So I'm really interested to get into this conversation because I think I'm going to have a lot to offer. I mean, maybe I won't. I don't know. We'll see. The jury's still out on that. Now, ladies, before we get started, please do not go to the profiles of any of the creators that I feature in any of my videos. We may not have Michelle Obama's arms, but we do have her attitude, and when they go low, we go high. Please do not contribute to the culture of hate we are working so diligently to dismantle not only on this channel, but around the world. So without further ado, I've slid over and we're going to get into what Curly Boy Chuck has to say about this trans teacher who is allegedly indoctrinating students. Let's get into it.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and back to another brand new video. So recently I was going through my timeline and somebody has sent me a DM of this individual who is a teacher. Now this person happens to be a trans identifying man, so a biological male who thinks they are a female. Now this person was going...
Again, the language. You can just say woman. You can just say woman. You can say trans woman. It's a lot of mental gymnastics for these people to be like, so you're trans, but what were you born as? What were you born as? It's giving tired. It's giving tired. Yeah.
On in this video about how they teach their kids and how they pretty much give their children in school information regarding gender identity and of course their own gender identity and their own journey, so to speak. I know. Now, it was a short video, so it prompted me to want to do some research and see if there was a common theme with this person. So put my detective hat on and actually found this person's TikTok with over, I think, 75,000 followers. And sadly enough, their feed is full of videos of them bragging about how they teach their kids this ideology in the classroom. So not math, not science, not English, no. Gender identity.
I think, okay, let's pause it here. A really big part of this conversation is like gender identity and gender things shouldn't be discussed in classrooms. And I can understand how gender identity doesn't necessarily fit within the curricular objectives in any given class. Maybe except for health, but and science too, but no, okay. Here's the deal though. The gender binary is built into the very fabric of how we exist as human beings, and your gender expression and your gender identity is so integral to who you are as a human being, who I am as a human being. It's just gender identity is weaved into the very fabric of who we are as individuals. So it is such a big part of how we show up in the world. And as an educator, as a teacher in the classroom, your job is to link the content you are attempting to teach to any group of students to those students' lived experiences. And not only that, there's this huge piece of the hidden curriculum because not only, especially if you're a homeroom teacher, not only are you teaching math, science, social, all of the things, you are also expected, required to teach these kids how to be good people in the world. So it's not necessarily like, I can think of this from my own experience. I never sat down with a classroom full of kids and went, okay, so here's how gender works and here's my gender identity and this and that. But it does come up. It mostly comes up in terms of conflict resolution when you're a teacher, because that's a huge part of being an educator, is teaching your students how to meaningfully dissolve a conflict that they are having with each other. It's just a huge part of teaching is when the kids are fighting. The kids are fighting. They're always fighting. There's always somebody who's in an argument with somebody else. And if you hear homophobia, if you hear transphobia, a big part of your job as a teacher is to instill non-discriminatory ideas and attitudes to your students. So no, it's not a curricular objective, but there are objectives when it comes to education of creating an environment where your students feel comfortable enough in order to learn from you. And if there are any discriminatory ideologies lingering amongst the students, not everybody's going to feel safe. And if you don't provide a community, a space, a classroom, a culture that is safe for everybody in the room, not everybody is learning, and you haven't done your job as an educator. So no, you're not sitting down teaching, but every part of your experience has to do with gender. So it would make sense that ideas of gender do come up in classroom conversations. It just happens. It just happens. And my perspective on this is that I'm a non-binary person. And when I first started teaching, I was going by Mr. Ugh. And that Mr. started to chip away at me because, as you can imagine, a teacher hears their name a billion times throughout the day. And because I kept getting called Mr., I didn't like that anymore. So I went with MX. I changed my honorific. I wasn't Mr. anything anymore. I was MX and then my last name. And that's also like on my driver's license, I have the X gender marker. Like, I am a non-binary person. And I wanted my experience at school as a teacher to reflect that. So even just by me going by MX created a conversation amongst the students because they didn't know what that is. But it also was a very simple conversation where I was like, oh, I don't like Mr. I don't like the way it sounds. That's pretty much it. That's literally pretty much it. And a lot of the kids, and so many kids were like, oh, okay, cool, dude. And then they'd move on and call me MX and then call me MX. It was really not an issue. It wasn't an issue to those kids that you could tell weren't being fed hateful ideologies at home. But it did give me some problems, but really on the whole, nothing that sticks out in my mind. If anything, the adults around me were more scared of the ramifications than what actually occurred in the classroom. So it's not always indoctrination. Yeah, so that's my experience. I don't know. I haven't seen the rest of this video, so I don't know what kind of teacher we're going to be reacting to. I don't know if I'm going to agree or disagree. I'm probably going to fall somewhere in the middle because everything seems to be a gray area, and I don't perfectly agree with everybody. I don't perfectly agree with myself all the time either. So, okay. Let's keep going.
Oh, I figured if I gotta be tortured, so do you. So let's go through some of these videos together, analyze them, discuss them, and see if this person should be teaching or if they should be fired. You guys know I like doing videos like this, particularly because, in my view, if we continue to pretend like it's not happening, it continues to fester and grow. So I choose to use my channel to expose and to reveal individuals like this who have access to children. Because in my opinion, this person should not be a teacher, and this person should not be having access to kids to indoctrinate them with their ideology.
Is this predicated upon the fact that you think all queer people shouldn't be teachers, or is this specifically to this example? Because sure, there would be some queer people that shouldn't be teachers, and there are some heteronormative people that shouldn't be teachers. It's just being queer doesn't inform whether you're going to be a good teacher or not. So I'm interested to see where this is going. Also, the flame shirt that he's wearing is giving me very 2007 Spencer's Gifts core. Wow. Memories all alone in the moonlight. I'm so tired. Okay, let's get into it.
So without further ado, sit back, relax, grab some popcorn, grab some coffee. Let's watch these videos.
Oh, I should get a coffee. I just have water here. Man, what a chump am I?
Together and analyze. Get ready. All right, got the first video queued up. Let's watch the train wreck.
I pride myself on being a teacher who's very open about her life. And one of the things I'm very open about is my sexuality. I have a trans flag, a bi flag, a non-binary flag, all on my desk at my work. But there's one thing I'm not open about, and it's being poly. And today that actually became something I had to worry about.
I don't know how much I want to stop this. It's probably going to be really frequently because I am very uniquely positioned to have this conversation because I am a queer content creator and I'm also a queer educator. So there is the difference, though, between sexuality and gender identity. I did have a non-binary flag next to my name plaque on my classroom. And I don't think gender identity is something that is inappropriate for children to be learning about because children also have a gender identity, and it's not something that's harmful in my opinion. I don't think this like woke gender ideology is harming the kid. Like no, it doesn't. It's not always like that. Does it have the potential to be inappropriate and lead children down the road of making choices that they wouldn't have otherwise? Sure. That's absolutely a possibility, but I don't think that's happening at the rate that these people like to think it is. I just don't see it happening. But it's a little bit different with that sexuality piece because while that isn't appropriate, it is also implied. You know what I mean? Like so many people. Okay, so for reference here, I worked in an elementary school. I never brought up my sexuality as a teacher it was everybody else around me that would bring up my sexuality. And it was talked about seemingly a lot, but it was brought up by other people, students, colleagues, parents. Like, people would talk about me being gay, and I had never said that. And I was like, also, I'm not gay. If you're listening to this and you're like, what? David, you have a lisp? Which is fair. But anyway, that's not the point. Is that it's not appropriate to be talking about sexuality, I believe, from a standpoint. But if you look at the content that is around in our world, like Cinderella being kissed by the princess by the prince, God, gay. No, like all of these, the stories that we read and all of these things, like even your mom and dad that love each other. Like, kids don't have an understanding of sexuality. Kids have an understanding of love. And love is something that can be talked about because love should be talked about. You know, that's just part of being a human, is experiencing feelings of love. That's not something that's bad or inappropriate. If you don't have an understanding of what the act of sex is, you're not thinking about the act of sex while people are talking about love. But because we're adults and we have an understanding of the act of sex, it's not inappropriate to talk about who you love, but it doesn't necessarily have a place in the classroom from a curricular standpoint. But it is brought up so much. Like, I remember in grade 7, my teacher handing out pictures from her wedding, and it was her and some guy. And I'm like, I don't know who that guy is. Girl, I barely know you. It's September 3rd. Why are we looking at your pictures? It's supposed to be math right now. It's just, there's so many. Yeah. This might take a really long time. I'm really passionate about this, but let's keep going.
For the first time. See, the kids are interviewing us teachers as a part of learning how to write profiles on others. They'll soon be doing it with each other, but they're starting with the teachers so they can all work together on one subject. And one of the kids on Tuesday is going to ask me if I have a partner.
Well, and that's exactly it, right? It's not completely linked to the curriculum, but there are so many things. It's really hard to, and in some cases harmful, to separate the human being that is the teacher from their experience in the classroom. In the same way that you can't separate the experience of the student when thinking about how to relate their current context with the curriculum that you are attempting to teach them. You are a human being first. And if you're not authentic and looking at the entire individual when you are coming to an educative context, it's just not meaningful. You have to create a community where everybody feels safe and is authentic. And if you're not paying tribute to who each individual is, I don't think you're doing a good job as a teacher. But it does get hard like this, because then you're almost put on a pedestal, but not a good kind of like winning a sports medal pedestal. You're kind of put in the spotlight as a queer teacher because you can't exist in the same way as your heteronormative counterparts, in my experience.
And the answer is yeah. And I have another one too. And I don't know how to handle that conversation, because while I know that the kids are more accepting of things like homosexuality, bisexuality, all of that, polyamory is not in the conversation. It's not something that is talked about. And I worry not only would this be something that might lead to rumors that I am cheating on my partner or that I am a swinger or something like that, but would also just totally derail the class. So the obvious answer, the one that I went to first, is I'm not going to talk about it. But that feels wrong too. I don't like lying to my students.
Well, and there is a level of you feeling like you're hiding yourself from your students too. And then that leads to a lot of like anxiety and unease if you're not being authentic. But it's also really hard to show up in an authentic way if you are nervous, scared, anxious about how that's going to be perceived from others. I don't have any experience or really knowledge behind the polyamory community, but that would be really hard to explain. But that would be really hard to not like explain to your students. But if Miss Thing across the hall is talking about her husband and her dog and her baby, like, that's implying sexuality too. So why can't queer people, and not even just queer people, why can't people who practice ethical non-monogamy also show up authentically in the world? That's what I think.
Like telling them falsehoods. And also, I don't feel comfortable answering the question by saying, yes, I have a partner, and having to pick which one I pick as the face for my relationship.
It's a hard place to be in. This is really interesting. I don't know if there's necessarily a right answer, but there's a conversation to be had here for sure.
Feels super, super gross, right? So I guess what tentatively I've decided after talking with my co-teachers and my assistant principal is maybe the right way to do it is answer the question honestly. Say, while I don't feel comfortable talking about who I'm in a relationship with in this specific setting, I will say that I am bisexual. I've dated people of many different genders. And if you're interested to talk about that or my own specific relationship, if you're really, really insistent, let's just not do it in the classroom setting, and we can do it like in lunch or in the after-school GSA club or something like that, where maybe it's a little bit more of an acceptable and understanding situation to bring this up.
I really don't think that's inappropriate. And of course, because as a teacher, you need to exist as a human being and you need to connect with your students. So if somebody is really interested and wants to talk to you about I understand how it sounds wrong, and that if kids want to know about your personal life, it sounds inappropriate, but if you're doing it in a developmentally appropriate way, it's not inappropriate. If you're somebody who's part of the gay straight alliance, like she said she was, there are developmentally appropriate ways to explain that situation to people who are asking. And she did the right thing. She talked to her other teachers, she talked to her colleagues, she talked to her administration team, and they gave her this advice. Like, she's doing all these things right, in my opinion, so far.
Now, this is a long, rambling thing, and that story has kind of wrapped itself up neatly, or at least it will on Tuesday. But I think it talks to a much broader issue, which is that, this is a really nuanced thought process I had to have, where I had to consider the emotional maturity of the kids, where I had to consider what they already know and are talking about and what they don't know and aren't talking about, and also have to consider how does this fit in with the content that I'm teaching. And the fact of the matter is, this is not a conversation that conservatives are having at all. They've decided that blanket statement, you can't do this at all. There's no place for it. And that just shows such a lack of thought and care. They're not understanding their children as people and where they're at. They're not understanding the content that is necessary, and they're not reckoning with any kind of reality. Yeah, maybe this is going to be an uncomfortable situation that may lead to some strange conversations, but that's part of being a person. And I'd rather have the kids be able to have those conversations in a safe place at school than on the internet where there's no one to make sure they're learning the right, respectful information.
Absolutely. Exactly. That's exactly it though. Sure. That's exactly it though, because if these kids talk to each other on the playground, the information that they're getting from each other is usually so backwards. My older brother told me this. No, red flag, get out of there. We don't want to hear about what your older brother thinks about this, because he's probably 14. And if he's over in the middle school, what they're learning on that playground is even worse. And then that comes to the elementary. It's just a mess. I don't see anything wrong with what this creator just said. I'm sat for what this guy's going to say.
All right, I gotta go in for this. Okay. So much to go over.
I bet.
So much to go over in just that one video. And that's just one video, folks. Just one. Do you guys remember when you were kids and you were going to school? When I was a kid going to school, I didn't even know my teacher's first name. Didn't know it. Because back then, that was considered inappropriate.
And that's part of a culture that separates the teacher from the students. And that doesn't actually build a positive learning environment. My kids knew my name. David. They knew it. Everybody knew it because it's my name. They didn't call me David, but they knew my name was David. You sign into your laptop and it's projecting onto the smartboard and it says David. It's this idea that teachers are better than and on a pedestal. I keep saying pedestal. It's this idea that teachers are so much better than us and they're the omnipotent leader with all of the answers. And it's just, no, that's not it. Teachers don't know everything. They're the facilitator. They're the leader. They're not the boss. And that nuance between a leader and a boss is something that's happening in education more recently. And I'm very happy to be a part of that conversation and be a part of that movement that shows a teacher as a human being with life experiences that are, I don't know where this is. This is hitting really close to home for me. So I'm talking a lot. So if you're still here, thanks, babe.
Appropriate to know personal information about your teacher, because your teacher was solely there to teach you math, science, English, academics.
Yeah, and you were also terrified of those teachers because maybe they were going to hit you too if you misbehaved. Calling back to an older time when you perceive things to be different and better doesn't mean they were actually better. School as a whole, I believe, is improving. It's still not great. Some of those test scores are looking pretty rough. A lot of kids don't know how to read very well. But I don't know if that's a comment on the culture of teaching as much as it is of how much teaching has stayed the same and how much teaching is not effective. And his callback to this older time is when teaching was less effective. In my opinion.
is not there to teach me about gender ideology, about sexuality, about topics that are not for the school setting. Now, I don't know what age group they teach. I have no clue, but I'm going to assume it's probably in the junior high school range because they do mention maturity, or I'm not sure about their maturity level. So I'm assuming they're probably not high schoolers. They're probably younger than that. But it just blows my mind. It blows my mind that in today's public school system, you have a teacher like this, and obviously a school system that allows this type of behavior, because as they said in the video, they spoke to other teachers in the school and the principal, and their conclusion was, you should answer it this way. Am I going crazy? Am I in the twilight zone right now? Like,
I don't know if you're going crazy, but you're showing that you don't really have an active understanding of what happens in a school setting, because the teacher isn't just some like skeleton. The teacher isn't just some vessel at the front of the classroom who's not a real human. Like this idea, like, I don't know. When you were a kid, when you were in school, did you really view your teachers as human? Like here's an example I'll give. If you were out at Walmart and you saw your teacher, did it feel weird to see them in a context that wasn't in the classroom? That's a part of like the not thinking of your teacher as a human being. And that's not really the case anymore. Why can't students view teachers as human beings with lives? Because teachers have lives. It's just how... I
understand wanting to prepare kids for the outside world, wanting to prepare kids how to do interviews and how to ask questions, right? But the questions and the conversations should be appropriate for the school setting. End of story. It is not your place as a teacher to act as a parent and to decide what is appropriate for a child when it comes to topics like sexuality and having multiple sexual partners. Please.
This is interesting. This is a personal plug. If you're interested in this teacher conversation and specifically the role of the teacher, I have an episode of my podcast, D-Talk with David Day. And in season 2, I think it was episode 2, I did Teacher as Redacted. And it was one of my final projects for the master's course that I'm working on right now in education with a specialization in neuroscience. So I'm not out here just yapping. I mean, I am out here just yapping, but it's a little bit different. It comes from an informed place. So if you're interested in my musings on the role of the teacher in the classroom, we walk through a bunch of different things of like, teacher is the parent, teacher is the friend, teacher is the scientist, teacher is the victim, teacher is the figurehead. Like, we walk through all of these things. It's a great podcast episode. So if you're interested in that, go and listen to D-Talk season 2. I think it's episode 2. It's called Teacher as Redacted. Yeah.
Tell me, in what universe is that appropriate for children in a school setting? Now, I'm not a prude. If you're into having multiple partners, that's you. Good luck. God bless you. Hopefully.
It does sound like you're a prude. But why can't this woman talk about her multiple partners when it would go seemingly unnoticed when it would go seemingly unnoticed if like a straight cis woman was talking about her husband? Right? Like, I understand you saying that talking about your sexual habits and behavior at school is inappropriate, because to some extent I think that is, or it definitely hits the ear as something that is inappropriate. But when you look at it from the lens of like, the cis heteronormative peers are doing the same thing, it's just not being noticed because this is transphobia, because this is homophobia, because this is discrimination. If we're taking away gender identity and sexuality out of education and out of schools, that's fine. But it has to be everybody. Then Miss Thing over here can't talk about her husband either. You know what I mean? It's just a double standard. Why can't this woman exist in the same way as everyone else?
Protection, but that's your business. I don't need to know about it. But you know who else doesn't need to know about it? Your students. And then they had the nerve to say, well, it may not be appropriate to talk about this in the classroom setting, but we can meet up later and talk about it during lunch or in a different setting. Are you freaking kidding me? Like, how about no? How about...
Well, and the language that he's using is making that sound extra inappropriate. It's not like, let's meet up later. It's like, come and talk to me at lunchtime, or when we're in literally the Gay Straight Alliance school club meeting. Like, that's not inappropriate. And I hate that. I hate this kind of language and tone that makes it seem more inappropriate than it is, because it's not nefarious in nature. Does it have the potential to be nefarious in nature? Absolutely. In the same way that the heteronormative peer teachers could have nefarious intentions as well. It has nothing to do with queerness or straightness. There are people who have nefarious, I keep saying nefarious, but it's really working. There are people that have nefarious intentions in the education system, and that has nothing to do whether they are queer or straight or anything else. So it's discriminatory to say that this person is nefarious because of their transness, because of their engagement in polyamory. It's not, yeah, it's really gross to say that.
Away from kids. How about that? Why would children need to know about your sexual escapades? Please tell me. Please tell me. Why?
Well, that's not what she said. It's not like she's going to be explaining sex acts. She's going to be explaining, from what I've gleaned from this video, that she has multiple partners. A lot of people engage in polyamory. I'm sure that there are kids who have parents who are polyamorous. And how affirming would that be if you were one of those kids that knew that your parents had multiple partners, to see somebody in the world who also represented that lifestyle and that choice? It's not inappropriate. Does it have the potential to be? Absolutely. But anything has the potential to be inappropriate. Wow, this is good. These are some juicy morsels. I didn't think I would, like, this is a really important conversation. I didn't think I'd be able to speak this well when I'm this exhausted, but okay, let's keep going.
Why would you want the kids that you're teaching to know so much personal information about yourself? Do you need affirmation that bad? That bad?
No, but again, the teachers across the hall are getting that same affirmation, but it's just not noticed because it's not a queer and or trans experience. How do we not see that it's the same thing with the non-queer counterparts? Ugh.
That you're willing to allow children to have access to your personal sexual life so you feel comfortable and you feel accepted? Like, talk about narcissism. And
it's not about being accepted. It's not. That's not narcissism. Dude, does he know what narcissism is? Like, Betsy, open up the DSM-5. It's not narcissism. And again, like, as a queer teacher, it would have been so much easier for me in my teaching experience if nobody ever talked about that, because I had to navigate all of these difficult conversations like the teacher that we're reacting to in this video. It would have, like, you have to then, it's like the onus is now on you to trailblaze and figure out how this is going to be done in the most appropriate way, because ultimately a lot of these conversations are not, because historically these conversations haven't taken place in schools. And when queer teachers make mistakes, because it does happen, everybody makes mistakes, but as they're navigating these difficult conversations, it's a slippery slope. You're standing on the edge of that cliff and you can say something that you regret saying. And like, I've been in that spot. I've made those mistakes in this kind of context and in other kinds of contexts. Like I've taught a math concept completely wrong. Prime and composite numbers, for example. I remember for 2 full years, I did that same lesson completely backwards and taught the kids the exact wrong way to identify a prime and composite number, and I couldn't fix it. I kept going back, and the way that I first taught it to them really stuck, and they just, like, teachers make mistakes. Teachers are human beings. We shouldn't be making them robots that don't have any feelings or life experiences. That takes away from the educative richness that is teaching.
They have the nerve to say, well, conservatives don't want to talk about this. Yeah, you're damn right. Because conservatives are smart. Because conservatives understand that there's a time and place for everything. That conversation is not inappropriate in general. It's inappropriate in the classroom with an adult speaking to children. That's what makes it inappropriate. What part of that do you not understand? Like, it blows my mind how...
It's only inappropriate if you are projecting the nefarious intentions of a teacher onto a student. And it has the potential to be that way. I'm gonna keep saying that because anybody can be in a position to want to and or take advantage of the mindset of students in any way. It's not inherently inappropriate. It can be done in developmentally appropriate ways.
Self-centered and narcissistic these people are. And the fact that this person is a teacher teaching children, guiding children, is scary. It is absolutely scary. Let me tell you something. If I had children, homeschooling.
Yeah, and tell me what education background you have to be able to do that effectively. It's such a wild argument of these people to be like, yeah, I would take my kids out. Like, all right, didn't we learn that with COVID? That you realized how hard it actually is to educate somebody? Yeah. Like, put up or shut up. Have some kids. Put up or shut up. Have some kids and do it then. It's not easy. It's not easy.
Story. I do not trust the public school system because of teachers like that. And
I don't know if I necessarily completely trust the public school system either, but it's not because of teachers like this. There is so much to criticize in public education, and queer teachers is pretty far at the bottom of that list for me personally.
System and a school board and principals who allow conversations like that to take place. And it's called education and progression. No, it's called craziness is what it's called.
No, and I think back to I call back to some of the ways in which like the Blackfoot culture or in just generally or just general indigenous ways of knowing viewed education, and that it was a cultural experience, and that it's not these isolated learning pieces of like here's addition and then here's photosynthesis. It's not these stilted, fragmented, scientifically efficient ways to fill up the brain of all of these useless to fill up the brain as if it's like your purse with all gay. It's not okay. I'm not making sense here. Give me a second. The problem with this is that this person, in my opinion, is calling back to scientific efficiency, or this person is calling back to social efficiency, which is a way of education of teaching children stilted facts of like, here's addition, here's photosynthesis, here's the planetary systems. Like, it's just, you can't, people's brains aren't like this big bag that you can just keep shoving little meaningless facts into. They have to all connect with each other. It's called schema. It's called scaffolding. How is this is really detailed now in like educational theory, but I call back to like indigenous ways of knowing and the way that some cultures and some indigenous cultures viewed education in terms of a cultural social experience, and that everything is so connected. And through this social connection, you inherently will learn all of the things that you need to know in order to be a thriving person in today's society. But this view of social efficiency and that you need to learn all of these meaningless facts only contributes to students doing well on academic testing, which then informs funding for some schools. And then it's all the trickle down of capitalism, honestly, of like, you shouldn't be talking about this because that question's not going to be on the test and you're wasting time. And that all calls back to the Sputnik. I have a Sputnik video. Jesus. I have a Sputnik video on my YouTube channel of where we look at the Sputnik documentary, you know, the potato joke, the satellite, the Russian satellite that happened in the 50s, I think. And Sputnik really informed the American school system, because the American school system was in child-centered progressivism, which is kind of what I'm talking about here with this indigenous ways of knowing and education as a cultural experience. But Sputnik really snapped the Americans out of that into, we need to be teaching all the facts so these kids can do well on the test, so then they become scientists, and then they can get other satellites in the air so we can beat Russia. And it's just, that's not meaningful. That's not meaningful education. It's not.
Opiate. End of story. Next video.
But I'm going to be honest, I don't know how I'm going to address their question.
So the question is about coming out to students, and as a teacher who has worked with elementary, middle, and high school aged students, I think I can help you out a little bit here. The first thing you should do is just keep your language simple, because this teacher specifically is working with elementary school kids. You want to use language they're going to understand based on experiences they have. Just say something simple like this. Here's what I said. I used to be a boy, but that made me hurt. It made me feel uncomfortable. So I went to a doctor, we talked. Now I take medicine and I'm a girl. Boom, there you go. That's all you really need to know. It's not a perfect explanation. If you're not on hormones or you don't want to take hormones, it's not the best, but it can be a really good starting point. If you're not on hormones, I would just say that your doctor and you decided to do things like this, and it's going to be what's good for you to make you happy.
I don't know necessarily if I would talk about like the medication or the doctor piece, but that would just be my personal opinion. But yeah, really simple language. Like me going as MX instead of Mr., I just went, I don't like the way it sounds. I like MX better. I don't like hearing Mr. from all of these screaming little goblins 80,000 times a day. Sorry, not. I think it was Jodie Carrington. She's an educational psychologist in my province, and she calls children these soul-sucking Cailloux. Do you remember Caillou? Do you remember Caillou, the bald, whiny baby? Me when I'm a bald, whiny baby.
Understand that. Generally speaking, kids like making people happy, you know? Now, you may see some purpose in going more in depth later on, but starting with that foundation is good for people. That said, before you do any of this, the most important thing you should do is talk with your administration. They may have their own ideas on how they want to handle this. They may say, this is kind of a big thing to do. You've taught people not only this class, we don't want this to sort of like get away from everyone, maybe we should have some kind of like formalized conversation with more members of the school.
Well, and that's exactly it. Yeah, looping in your administrative staff is a really strong, important thing to do here. And God help you if you do not have the support of your administration. I'm pretty lucky that on the whole, for the most part, I've had very supportive principals and vice principals and colleagues. And I've been pretty lucky in that respect. But I don't know what I would do if you didn't have somebody who was respectful of those things. Yeah, that would be hard. It would.
They say, no, we want to keep it just in your class. They may unfortunately say there's some things they're not okay with you saying, right? You need to understand all of that before you make steps. I'm usually totally on board with the ask for forgiveness, not permission little camp, but this is not the type of subject and not the type of time where you want to be making that risk. The best thing you'll get, though, is their support. Because what you don't want to have to deal with is coming out to these kids then tell their parents give calls, and you are now fielding a whole bunch of calls.
Yeah.
Send them to admin. Send them straight to admin. And hopefully, fingers crossed, admin's line will be, listen, we hear you, but she's our employee, we support her, we're going to back her in this way, and you're just going to have to deal with that.
Yeah, that's all perfect advice so far. I would agree and say the same thing. It's interesting because this is all predicated upon the fact that you need to keep yourself safe as a queer person. It's just not it, and that's not something that's part of the job description for heteronormative teachers. They don't need to worry about any of this. So it sucks because a lot of queer teachers burn out. Hi, it's me. I'm sitting in my apartment making a YouTube video instead of being in the classroom. I burnt out. I'm going to go back. I love teaching. I want to go back. I don't know when. I'm having a great time now doing this here with you. So thank you for watching these videos and supporting me. Oh my God. Mwah, thanks. But yeah, it's sad because so many of these queer teachers burn out because so much of their working memory because so much of their cognitive load is tied up in, are these people going to be accepting of me? And am I going to like say something that's taken the wrong way? And like, if these kids aren't learning how to spell, you think they're going to accurately be able to recount what you actually said? Like, eyewitness testimony is garbage. Human memory is garbage for a lot of the time. So like, yeah, you have to be careful even with your tone sometimes too, because kids can go home and say, well, they said this when that's in fact not what you said. And it's not that they're lying on purpose, but it's just what they remember, right? Wow, this is wild. God, I've been talking so much. I'm so dry.
You can get that. That's the best thing you have. So there's the main 2 bits of advice. Be prepared for a lot of questions, and don't be afraid to say, if you don't mind, I'm not comfortable answering that one. There you go. So yeah, feel free to ask me any follow-up questions in the comments. If you want to DM, let me know, and I'll follow you back and we can message. But good luck. I think it's going to be okay, all things considered. It's really not as scary as it seems. You got this. All right, bye-bye.
I love this creator so much. She's so sweet. If you're watching this, girl, I love you. It's just great. I thought I was going to disagree with her with some of these things based off of Curly Boy, whoever here's description of her in the beginning. And you see how I'm using she, her pronouns for this individual who has talked about her using she, him, instead of just saying they and he, like this garbage person is here. Sorry, no, that's an ad hominem, but he's just upsetting. He's upsetting. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question.
I love that I participated in ad hominem and then he immediately participated in ad hominem. So nobody's safe.
Silly me, I have a question. Why do kids need to know about your sexuality in order for you to teach a class?
They don't, but kids know the sexuality of other teachers because they talk about it in ways that go unnoticed because they're not queer, and queerness can be seen as something that is inappropriate and or unprofessional, and that is discrimination. I feel like he's just throwing me some fastballs and I'm here with my bat and just knocking them out of the park. Is that sports people? Is that a sports reference? I didn't play sports. Maybe that's why I'm this gay. Maybe that's why I'm this feminine. God, I have brain rot after watching this for so long. It's only been 11 minutes. I've been recording for 50. Okay.
Oh, wait. Why? I'm sure I had many teachers throughout elementary, junior high, and high school who were straight, bi, gay, and everything in between. And guess what? We never knew. You know why? Because it wasn't important.
It's not important. I would agree with that, but it is something that is implied with non-queer counterparts of teachers. But again, I'm having a feeling that I'm probably the same age as Mr. Curly, whoever here. And the teaching culture when we were in school was not good. Not good. And just because something is the way it was doesn't mean that that's the way that it should stay.
Our business. And again, a teacher's job is to teach the kids academics, not teach the kids about their personal sexual preferences.
Well, that's a false dichotomy, but that's exactly the argument between social efficiency and child-centered progressivism. So if you're interested in this, not only go listen to my podcast, but look into the differences between the teaching styles of social efficiency and child-centered progressivism, because different school districts and different schools and different teachers have different ideas of what teaching is. And that's kind of what that comes down to. And there is studies and there is data. There's so many studies that have been done that show that social efficiency is not good. I have no other adjectives to give you other than to say it's not good, it's not meaningful, it's not effective, it's not a fourth adjective, it's just bad. It's bad.
Preferred pronouns, or their warped idea of what and who they are. I just don't understand. In that whole long-winded video, the question I had was, why? What purpose does it serve for that teacher to want to tell their children that they are bisexual, that they are gay, that they have multiple sexual partners, that they are trans inside? Those things are not appropriate for school. It's just not, because it has nothing to do with you as a teacher teaching the kids and giving them the knowledge that they need to succeed in academics.
Well, that's exactly it, in academics, but not overall in life. That's the difference there. Social efficiency or child-centered progressivism. This guy is arguing social efficiency. The other teacher we've been talking about is child-centered progressivism. I'm definitely on the child-centered progressivism lane as well. So, yeah. Because the data supports that. It's not just my personal opinion. That's what gets better results out of school.
A college course on social structure and sociology and interpersonal relationships, then I can understand having a more open dialogue. But we're talking about elementary and junior high school kids here. We're talking about kids who don't even understand the complexities of sexuality and gender identity. And here you have a teacher who's probably more confused than the kids, trying to teach them about their gender fluidity and their gender ideology and their sexuality. Again, be and do what you want to do on your own personal time with consenting adults. But why are you bringing it into the classroom? Why must you have 50...
Because they're a human being, and you can't leave your humanness at the door. Well, you can, but you shouldn't. Like, I just want to say the same thing over and over again. So we're probably, girl, if you made it this far into the video, we're probably on the same page. So yeah, I don't need to repeat that same thing over and over again. Yeah, yikes. This person doesn't know what goes on in schools. Just like the hard stop. They don't know. They don't know.
And rainbow flags in the classroom. Why must you make it known to the kids your sexual partners and your preferred sexual ideas of what life is? Like, why?
Because they ask. They literally ask. I would be in the middle of a math lesson and the kids would be like, Max, do you have a girlfriend? Like, this is not an appropriate time to be talking about that. But like the kids bring it up. I remember, okay, here's a story. Here's a personal anecdote for this story. And if you've made it this far in this video and you know me in real life, there's a few handful of people that would know exactly this story because it involved them. Anyway, not the point. I remember, okay, here's a perfect example. It was lunch one day and I'm eating my lunch in my classroom with my students, and I was eating what I had prepared and I microwaved it, and it was a nice like balanced meal. You know, I had a protein and a veg and probably a starch in there as well. And one of the girls said, how did you learn to cook? Like, you always have such nice meals. And I didn't even really think about it, and I just gave my honest answer, and I said, oh, when I was in university, I dated a man who was a chef, and he was also going to school, and he had learned all of these like chef techniques, and I learned so much about what I know from cooking from this man. And then one of the kids went, oh, I was right. I said, sorry, what? And he said, I won. And I said, well, what did you win? And he said, no, I just knew something. I was like, well, what did you know? And he leaned in and he was like, that you're gay. And the whole room fell dead silent, and they all turned and looked at me of like, oh, what is he going to say? Because, oh, what are they going to say, right? And I went, oh, okay, well, I'm not, but go off, sis. And then that was it, right? But then, of course, because I said that, because I'm not gay, but this kid just told me that I was gay, and now it's like this weird situation where, yeah, now we're talking basically about my sexuality, and I didn't bring this up, but I'm not going to let somebody say something about me that isn't true in that context. And then it just becomes so messy so quickly, right? So those kinds of conversations come up. They do. And if you don't think that those conversations come up in a way that's not nefarious, you're misinformed and you haven't spent time in schools other than when you were a student. This is something too that a lot of people feel positioned to talk about education and teaching and schooling because they were students. But ultimately, your experience in a school does not equate to you having informed, nuanced, science-based anything about what happens within what happens within the confines of a school. People think they're positioned to talk about it because they had a K-12 school experience, but that's just not the case. You were a kid. That's not the same thing as an educator who is educated in that context. Like, girl, I have 6 years of education behind me and it's about to be 8. So I'm not just speaking here on a whim because it serves my gender ideology. It's actually the literature and the research that is out there so far. Anyway.
Why is that important for the kids to understand in order for you to teach? Can you not teach the kids math and science and English without them first knowing that you are bisexual? I'm just curious. When do we cross the line and decide that the only way for these kids to be taught properly, they must know everything about my personal sexual life? Maybe I'm just from a different generation.
Yeah, he's speaking in all of these absolutes, and the conservative people behind the screen watching this earnestly are like, oh my God, yeah, that's so bad. Like, oh yeah, you're right. But like, it's just not, there's no nuance in this. There is no nuance in this. It's giving 12-year-old with a microphone.
I am an older millennial, so maybe my perspective is just different. And
you're just discriminatory.
I mean, this person is probably a Gen Zer or somebody within that close age range. They don't seem to understand that the question isn't, how do I come out to my kids? The question is, why are you obsessed enough to want to come out to your children?
It's not that you want to come out to your children. It's that in order for you to authentically show up, they need to know that. They do. I'm sorry. Like, if you're going to be changing your pronouns, you need to explain to them that you're changing your pronouns, and that's a conversation that needs to be had. If you are hiding yourself and who you are from your students, you're not going to be able to authentically meet them where they are. You can't hide yourself and still do a good job. Again, you can do so in a developmentally appropriate way. It has the potential to be nefarious, but it's not implied. Yeah.
Important for your students in school to know about your personal sexual preferences. Why? I don't understand. And whatever happens...
it's clear you don't understand, babe.
If a kid asks a question, hey, Jimmy, thank you for asking that question, but it's not appropriate in the classroom, and I'm not going to answer that. Anyway, so back to the textbook. What happened to that? What happened to that? What is so wrong about that? What is so wrong about creating boundaries with children and letting them know you can ask the question, but it doesn't mean you're going to get an answer? What happened to those days? Now it's like, oh, Jimmy asked a question. Everybody stop. Jimmy must know everything about me, because if I don't tell him, then I'm going to feel like I'm a liar. No, you're an adult. You're a teacher. Act like one. What is wrong with you? Blows my mind. And then, of course, they make the comment about, and hopefully, if parents find out about it and they complain, the administration will have your back. And wish they will, because we've seen it multiple times, right? The school board does not care about parents' rights and parental rights.
Well, no, because typically principals have higher education, and the more education you have, the likelihood of you being discriminatory goes down. It's what the data shows. In the same way of you having a higher education means your likelihood of having a religious affiliation goes down as well. I don't know if this person is educated, but it's not coming off that way.
About protecting their liberal, crazy ideologies, which is why they're still fighting to have certain books in the libraries that are very inappropriate, and why they are allowing teachers to be as open as they possibly can be about their sexual identities and their gender identities, because that, in some crazy world, has become more important than teaching children and protecting their minds. It is not your place as a teacher to decide when a child needs to learn and understand about adult situations. And
gender is not an adult situation, and love is not an adult situation. Sexuality, sure, but who you love and who you are is not inappropriate at any age.
If a child asks a question that is inappropriate, that is too personal, yes, it is your job as a teacher to say, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. Please do not ask me that question again. Your job is to be a teacher, not to be a best friend. Boundaries, people. What happened to boundaries? Next video. All right, guys.
Yeah, all of these hard boundaries is what landed people with all of these mental health issues. I can't. I'm so tired, but I'm so triggered, as it were. I'm just another liberal snowflake out here who's triggered AF. All right.
This is the last one because I cannot watch another video. I cannot watch another video.
Yeah, tell me about it.
This crazy person. I just can't do it. I'm sorry. I love you, but I can't do it.
I don't love you.
So let's watch this last video together and hopefully not lose our minds.
So I posted a TikTok yesterday about how I start conversations about gender and sexuality with my students. I ended up privating it for unrelated reasons, but I got a lot of weird feedback where some people were like, you shouldn't start these conversations. You shouldn't talk about this with your kids. Yeah, you should. Because for these kids to know that a queer adult exists, to know that trans people exist and are normal, is life-changing.
It's not your place.
They need someone to start this conversation.
It is life-changing, and it can be life-saving as well. If I would have grown up with any queer representation, I would have had such a better experience as just a young queer person. And it is like it isn't, like it is your place and it isn't your place. Like, you can understand where he's coming from, but ultimately, I don't know. Let's keep going.
Because they don't know they have the permission to ask me about stuff. They're uncomfortable. They're scared. They don't know what's going on with themselves, and they need someone to affirm that they're okay, that they're normal. And they need someone they can ask silly questions to. And I want to be that person. I've had people ask me permission to identify as non-binary. I've had people ask if it's all right to like they, them pronouns, but also like she, her, or something else. I've had someone ask me that if coming out as bisexual means they need to start wearing flannels. These kids need people to
The answer is yes. And if you come out as lesbian, you do need a half-completed woodworking project in your living room at all times. It's just the rules. It's just the rules.
too.
Okay.
That was short.
That creepy ass laugh is reason enough to believe that that person is not right in the head. I'm sorry.
No, it's not. It's not.
Not right in the head. Okay, here we go. Thankfully, that was more of a short video because I cannot handle the rambling of that person.
If there's anybody rambling here, it's me.
Yes. Bi, straight, gay people exist in the world. Guess what? Those kids, as they get older, will understand that as they get older and as they experience life outside of the classroom. But again, it is not your place as a teacher to indoctrinate or to try to influence their view.
It's not indoctrinating or influencing. I think it's a really interesting conversation of whether that is the place of the teacher, because it could be and it could not be. I could argue it in both directions, honestly. But if we're going to argue against it, we need to do it for the same way of their non-queer counterparts. So it needs to be balanced.
Of topics such as sexuality, because it is not your place. You're a teacher, not a parent. There is a difference. If a parent is not ready to have those conversations with their children, what gives you the right? What gives you the right to violate that and to have those very in-depth, personal conversations about sexuality to another parent's child? What gives you the right? Then what happens is that child goes home and is more confused and is now asking their mom and dad.
They're only confused if the people at home are discriminatory, which does happen. It does.
Which gender identity? What does it mean if you're a girl but you want to be a boy? Because my teacher was talking about that and I'm confused. I thought boys and girls were just boys and girls. Like,
the way that I've definitely had kids go home to conservative parents and say this exact thing to them. It's like he's reading from my biography.
What's going on? Like, now you're opening Pandora's box, right? Now you're forcing...
But it shouldn't be Pandora's box, and that's the point. If the box has already been opened by everybody around, and it's just something that's normalized, like, is being straight opening Pandora's box? Like, oh, mom and dad, like, my male teacher said that they had a wife, and I'm confused now. Can boys marry girls? Is that a thing? Like, what does it mean if you're born a boy and you identify as a boy? Like, what does cisgender mean? I don't get it. Like, it's just, that's not Pandora's box because that has been normalized. So if we normalized queerness and transness, it wouldn't be a thing. It's only a problem if you're going home to discriminatory conservative parents, which are usually the loudest ones that then create videos like this.
Parents to have these very uncomfortable conversations.
Like, you should be uncomfortable. You should be uncomfortable. If it's uncomfortable for you, I don't know if you should be uncomfortable. Like, it just, does it have to be uncomfortable though? I don't think it has to. If you're uncomfortable, that probably is alluding to a different problem that's unrelated.
That we're not ready to have, and they should not be forced to have, because you can't keep your mouth shut, because you are more concerned with you being affirmed and you feeling validated at the expense of parents now having to clean up the mess that you created. It's insanity to me.
This guy doesn't know. This guy knows nothing. I'm so annoyed at this guy.
But it's also just a reflection of how backwards our society has become, honestly. Because one thing that they said that really stood out to me in that video was, these kids are asking all these questions and they want to know this, they want to know that, they want to know, should you wear flannel if you're gay? The fact that kids feel comfortable enough to even have those types of inappropriate conversations with their teachers just goes to show you how far we have gone as a society. Because again, when I was growing up, I was not allowed to ask personal questions to my teacher. I would have gotten...
Kids should be comfortable around their teachers. How is that something that needs to be explained? Kids should be comfortable around their teachers. How can you effectively be a teacher if you're not providing an environment that leads your students to be comfortable with you? Are you kidding me? You cannot learn. Oh my God. So if you're working memory and then this over top, and if your lid is flipped, if you're not comfortable, you can't learn because this is your evolutionary brain. This is your brain right there. I'm really losing it here. Sorry about this. If your lid is flipped and you don't have, I forget what this is called, the part of your brain that's up, but if your lid is flipped, you can't effectively learn. So if you're not comfortable, you're not learning. So if you're not making your students feel comfortable around you, they're not learning. And that is your job as a teacher, is to have the students learning.
And I wouldn't have dared to ask a personal question of my teacher. Are you married? What's your sexuality? What do you think about this? Like, in what world would that ever be appropriate for a
in the world of child-centered progressivism, which is where the world is heading,
to ask of their teacher? But what's happening is you have these teachers who have created these non-boundaries, who want their students to ask them any and everything because it makes them feel good to know.
Not want to. Please don't ask me, but they do. Kids ask everything. That's literally their only job, is to ask questions.
That they're influencing the next generation. So they love these questions. They love these conversations because they know that these conversations are going to trickle over into those children's parents' household. And that's what they want. You want to change the world. You want to change perspectives. You want to change...
Having a queer teacher does not make you queer. I had nothing but straight teachers my whole childhood, and it didn't make me turn out straight.
Start with the kids. And that's why people like that should have no access to children, because they are admitting that they don't care about boundaries. They don't care about how much indoctrination they give to children. As long as it affects their view of the world and their view starts to mirror his view,
ew,
that's all that matters.
Don't say his.
And that is such a selfish, disgusting perspective. And in my opinion, an abuse of power as a teacher. Because your only job is to teach academics to your students, not to teach gender or sexual ideologies. That is not your place. How dare you? Again, folks, home, school. If you can, please do so. Because trust and believe, you don't want somebody like that teaching your child.
I do.
All right, that's all that I can take for today.
All right, so we're going to leave it there, folks. Yeah, that was yet another impossible watch here on my channel. Thank you so much for sticking this long video out with me. If you're interested more on my thoughts on education, you can go listen to my podcast episode, Season 2, Episode 2, Teacher as Redacted. Please look into child-centered progressivism and social efficiency and the ways in which those different educational theories transform into different educational experiences and test scores and life outcomes and things like that. It's a really interesting conversation. So yeah, I think this person is transphobic. They're misinformed. It's giving middle schooler with a mic. And I think they showed off a lot of discriminatory and disgusting thoughts here. So consider subscribing to the channel. Like the video if you like the video. Let me know what you think down below. And until the next one, goodbye.